702.
Let's walk the talk on 92.7
and 106 FM.
As electricity consumers in South Africa, we must brace ourselves for yet another blow in our pockets because Nersa, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, has admitted to making a serious error when approving Eskom's multi-year tariff increases. The blunder has now resulted in an out-of-court settlement with Eskom that will see electricity tariffs rising even higher than what was announced earlier this year. You'd remember that they had said that from April 2026, tariffs will increase by nearly 9%. Now, that's instead of the previous 5%. And again, in 2027, by close to 9% instead of 6%. The deal has been criticized by various individuals and groupings as secretive, lacking transparency, and unfairly punishing already struggling households. Chris Yelland is energy expert. He needs no introduction at all. He's joining us right away to give us some insights and his knowledge on the matter. You are also encouraged to participate because this affects both you and I. You can just call us on 011-883-0702. Chris Yelland, thanks for your time. Welcome to 702.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Chris, you'll forgive me for being elementary, but I always want us to take a few steps back, not assume that people understand the intricacies of this problem. So if you don't mind going back to grade 1 for me and explaining this mistake as to what really happened and how did it even come about? You would expect Nersa to have researchers, people who are crunching numbers. You'd have legal entities that would be working with it. What really happened?
Yeah, look, a little bit of background, firstly, and that is what is called the multi-year price determination. Now, every few years, Eskom submits an application to Nersa for price increases for the next few years. So the last application that Eskom submitted was in 2024. And it covers the year's financial year, Eskom financial year ending 31st of March 2026, 27, and 28. So it's a 3-year so-called multi-year price determination. And the first year came into effect on the 1st of April this year. And so this 3-year multi-determination extends for 3 years thereafter. So Nersa considers this application by Eskom, looks at it very carefully and disallows certain costs and says those costs are not going to be allowed to be passed through to the customer in the tariff. Because in Nersa's view, they are imprudently, inefficiently, and wrongly incurred. So Nersa's job is to scrutinize Eskom's application very carefully and make its own determination as an independent regulator. And this is what Nersa did. And it announced price increases for the 3 years, the first of which came into effect on the 1st of April this year and was about a 12.5% increase. Next year, there's going to be about a 5 or 6% increase, and the next year, a similar 6 or 7% increase. Yes. So those 3 announcements were made, and those are what we were expecting to be the price increases for the current year and the next 2 years.
Yes.
But then Eskom took the matter to court and said, you've got your sums wrong. And they put forward an application to the court to have this matter reviewed in court. And that's where the current issue stands at the moment.
And that particular court settlement, we didn't know much about it, but it appears that as part of the settlement, we will be paying more for Nersa to make up for its mistake. Is that correct so far?
Yeah, so in fact, it didn't go before the court. Eskom submitted its review application to the court to take this matter on review. And at that point, Nersa and Eskom engaged on the merits of the document that Eskom prepared for the court. and they reached a out-of-court settlement even before this matter went before the judge. And that's where things are. A settlement is that Nersa has acknowledged a mistake amounting to 54 billion rand, which it did not allow to be passed through to the tariff, and which it now says needs to be passed through to the tariff. Eskom has adequately demonstrated that Nersa made a mistake in its calculations, and that this 54 billion rand now needs to be recovered through the tariff, and this will involve a price increase over and above the price increases that Nersa allowed in its MYPD6, that is the 3-year multi-year price determination. So these are additional increases over and above the increase that has already been announced. And these arise from from Nersa's mistake, which it acknowledges. You asked the question, how can this happen? And I agree with you. How can this happen? This is not a trivial mistake. This is a 54 billion rand mistake. And Nersa has, specialists and people that, as you say, crunch the numbers. It then goes to a committee called the Electricity Subcommittee, which includes the Electricity Regulator, a member on the board, and a number of other executives at Nersa. And they consider, the calculations carefully, and they approve them, and they then recommend, the price increases to the board of Nersa, which comprises another set of board members and executives, who then look at it again and finally approve, the determination that has been made by Nersa. How this got through, we just don't know, but it does demonstrate. And by the way, this is not the first mistake. There have been a number of mistakes that have been challenged in court, and courts have decided that Nersa applied its own methodology incorrectly, and they've had to correct this. So in addition to this 57 billion rand mistake, 54 billion mistake, there are other determinations that bring this total amount that needs to be recovered from the customer to 92 billion.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, 96 billion rand. So actually now the amount that has to be recovered from the customer that has been under-recovered in the tariff is a total of 96 billion rand. This is a staggering amount, and is going to result in substantial price increases over the next few years.
That have to be absorbed by both you and I. Chris, are we to deduce some sort of structural or systemic incompetence or negligence at worst from Nersa, given that, as you've said, this is not their first mistake?
Yeah, look, I don't want to unduly point fingers at individuals or the organization, etc. We need a regulator. We need a strong regulator. We need a regulator that can stand up to Eskom's applications and scrutinize them properly and look after the customer. So what I'm saying is this. I do think that Nersa made a significant error. You can call it incompetence or lack of professionalism, a little slip up. Well, it's not so little, but it's certainly a slip up, at least. Those are the facts of the matter. But the thing that really concerns me, because this is going to result in significant price increases to the customer, I ask the question, what has Nersa been doing to ensure that a whole lot of billions and billions of rands of maladministration, corruption, fraud, procurement irregularities, and other inefficiently and non-prudently incurred expenses that have been passed through to the customer already in the past 10 years?
Yes.
What is Nersa doing to claw back this money on behalf of the customer? At the moment, it seems to be going out of its way to ensure that Eskom can claw back what is duly owed to it. But it should also be looking after the customer and clawing back billions of rands on behalf of the customer, which would result in price decreases and not increases.
Yeah. I've asked some of our listeners to participate, and it's only fair, Chris, that I allow them to do so on 0727021702. But first, let me kick off with a very sound question coming from Darren. As I read it, I need you to just listen in, Chris, because this is pointed to you. And Darren is asking, how is Eskom incentivized to manage costs if this system allows Eskom to simply pass on costs to the customers? That's one. The second part of the question says, which costs can be passed on? The third part says, is it an artifact of the monopolistic structure of electricity production in South Africa? Is this system common across the world? Chris?
Yeah, so the reality is it's quite correct that we do have a monopoly situation currently, to all an extents and purposes. Customers do not really have choice, a significant choice as to where they buy electricity. They have to buy it either from Eskom or from a municipal distribution who buys from Eskom. So electricity supply is largely a monopoly business. It is changing in the future. The question is asked about what kind of, what is the role of Nersa? And what costs get allowed to be passed through in the tariff and what don't? Well, the law is very specific about this. The law says, this is the Electricity Regulation Act, says that only efficiently and prudently incurred costs can be passed through to the tariff. Eskom is entitled to recover its prudently and efficiently incurred costs through the tariff. It is not permitted to recover inefficiently or imprudently incurred costs, such as corruption, such as mistakes that Eskom make, such as maladministration, procurement irregularities, procurements at prices that are inflated. Those are things that the job of Nersa is to look at Eskom's application line by line in detail, look at every cost within Eskom's structure, and to decide which of those it is going to allow through to the customer and which it is not. Now, look, this is not an easy matter, and it requires experience and judgment, careful judgment as to what is imprudent and what is inefficient and what can be passed through and what cannot be passed through. So the regulator's job is to do just that. Its job is not to pass through costs that are imprudent, and its job is not to allow real costs to be blocked. And that is what happened in the case of Eskom. They blocked certain costs of Eskom that should have been allowed into the tariff. And that is why this 54 billion rand is now going to be clawed back through increased prices. But the point I'm making is that there are many, many billions of costs that should not have been passed through to the country, such as corruption and fraud and procurement irregularity over the last 10 years. Yeah. And in particular, I want to point to prepayment electricity fraud, which is costing the country billions of rand, costing Eskom billions of rands every year. And to my knowledge, those costs are being passed through to the customer, and they are costs that should not be passed because they result from inefficiency and poor management on the side of Eskom. So those are the kind of costs that should not be passed.
Chris, we have plenty of questions and concerns. I would love us to explore those in the next 5 minutes or so. So I very quickly, before I take our voice note, I'd like to find out, and it's an unfair question. Perhaps you'll refer it to the legal eagles. To what extent can customers, Eskom customers, take these costs back to Nersa, petition the court for Nersa either to suspend the costs or for Nersa to absorb the costs because of their own mistakes? I'm sure the structure doesn't allow Nersa to do that generally, but I'm just trying to think on the side of the consumer. What sort of recourse do they have?
Yeah. Well, I think customers of electricity need to become more active in this matter. And I am aware of two civil society organizations, NGOs, that do look at these things closely and do act on behalf of customers. And look, there are many organizations. A single customer on its own has very little power. But if customers band together in the form of industry associations of large customers, there's an association called the Energy Intensive User Group. There's BUSA, there's BLSA, and there's a whole range of civil society NGOs who act on behalf of citizens. And these are the kind of organizations that can and should take up this matter, and they can take this matter on review in the courts. And the courts can send this matter back to Nersa and say, do your job properly. Yeah. Eskom has done it repeatedly, looking after its own interests.
Sure.
But customers and their own industry associations need to look after the interests of customers.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen now.
Allow me to take just a couple of voice notes, please. I'm going to ask you to collectively respond to them briefly, and then I'll read one or two voice notes and we'll call it a day on our conversation. Chris, 26 after 10, 0727021702.
How much money does Eskom want to steal from us? They've got a profit of billions, and then they still want to increase the money to make more money. So who can steal more money?
Hi. Good morning, 702. This is a joke, guys, man. How can you make a mistake of a 54 billion rand? A mistake of 54 billion rand. Then you say we've got people who say saving the government. No, guys, come on. It's not possible, man. Thanks. This is Patrick and Perry.
Hi, good morning. Joya from the East Rand. Well, I think this is a big scam between Nersa and Eskom. My view is Nersa must provide facts, not just say we made a big mistake. If they did make a big mistake, then they must be responsible for it, not we, the people. We didn't make a mistake. We keep paying for this useless and incompetent two organizations. Therefore, I call on the people to boycott the increases. And there's many ways we can make it. We can make them apologize. So if Nersa made a mistake, they must pay for it. Thank you.
Morning, Thabo and Chris. I just have one question. Just like all other government departments and parastatals, etc., how much longer are we going to be suffocated by increased costs due to inefficiencies, lack of experience, lack of knowledge, to people who get appointed to these very important top jobs? The cost is always borne by the citizens of this country. Everybody's mistakes we pay for. We just cannot afford it anymore. Please, look at what's happening around the world, guys. This country has to open its eyes. Look what's happening in Indonesia. Look what happened in Kenya. And it's on the increase, and yet us who pay the taxes are being taxed to death.
Chris, in closing, just a few seconds. At which point do we know already at which point will these increases start affecting us as customers, as payers, as rate payers?
Firstly, just to say that what we've heard from, these voice notes is the deep frustration that customers have with the activities, the actions of Eskom and Nersa, and I share this frustration. You asked the question, when will these start impacting us directly? And the answer is on the 1st of April 2026.
Goodness me.
The first clawback of this mistake will start impacting the price of electricity in the form of a higher electricity price than was determined in the MYPD6 multi-year price determination. So also there was a question about consequences. Who is being held accountable for this? And Nersa has acknowledged that it made a mistake, but it says it's too early to start talking about accountability yet. They've only just reached this so-called settlement. It's been a secret settlement. There's been complaints about lack of transparency, which I share. I think it's irregular that this should have been done. The settlement should have been reached behind closed doors. So they do say that there will be consequence management of some kind or other. And I just want to point out, though, 54 billion rand is not the kind of money that Eskom has in their back pocket, nor is it the kind of money that Nersa have in their back pocket. Ultimately, either the customer is going to pay, that is you and I, are going to pay this 54 billion rand through increased tariffs, or the taxpayer is going to be paid, because government and Eskom and Nersa get bailouts and from the fiscus, and the fiscus is paid by the taxpayer. So one way or another, we pay for these mistakes. Whether we pay as taxpayers, whether we pay as customers of electricity, we pay.
I gotta run, but I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I didn't love the tariff hike discussions, but thanks for your insights. They came very invaluably, especially given that we understand that from the 1st of April, 2026, we'll start forking out that huge bill. Very interesting. Chris Yelland, energy expert.